architect from the University of Virginia. Spent a good deal of time, studying the built environment, working in space in that regard from a design point of view, but found an opportunity to take, a little bit of a tact early in my career to go and work at the State Department for the U.S. Agency for International Development in Eastern Europe, Soviet Union, and spent about 7 years there working on policy considerations before coming to New York. And that was 20 some years ago. I am now 21 years without a car, which I think is sort of interesting, just as a side note. Having spent the first 30 years growing up in the suburbs, like I suspect many are, I made the switch. But nonetheless, did a work on the private equity side, construction side, and then I came across a little company called Delos, which is where I work today. Now, they had a very profound observation that sort of builds off the back of the sustainability movement. Of course, you should use recycled materials. Conservation is important. Save for the future, your grandkids, kids, and so forth. And that's such a profound and important piece of the conversation. But the founders were sitting there watching this business model saying, well, buildings themselves have such a massive impact on the environment. Don't they also have an impact on people? And so they considered it for a bit, and they said, well, what do we know about healthy buildings? And they said, well, you got to look out for radon, right? That's a subsurface condition. It's a mineral condition that hurts people from a cancer-promoting environment. We know about asbestos quite well from the Johns Manville days of the 80s and all this sort of thing. And if you're in New York, you know about lead paint, and you got to be concerned with that. But beyond that, those sort of very rudimentary components, there was no prescription for what a healthy building should include. And so they got doctors from the Mayo Clinic, the Cleveland Clinic, Harvard Public Health Environment, Johns Hopkins, and they sat them at a table across from HOK, HKS, CBRE, Hines, Structure Tone, and others on the building space. And they said, and they didn't tell them why they were coming, by the way. This is the cool part. They didn't tell them why they were coming. And they sat them down and they said, guys, if you could dream it up, what is the best place for the human body to spend time? And both sides looked at the other and said, no one's ever asked us that before, right? Medical professionals, pills and surgeries and treatments of problems you already have. The building professionals, economic benefit, net to gross, perhaps beauty, sustainability, how do we use less and have more? And that began the path of about 5 years of research with those professionals to say, no one has ever prescribed what a healthy building should look like. I mean, and remember, 90% of your life, if you calculate it, has been spent in a building, probably. If you're 50 like me, I've spent 45 years in a box. And that's crazy because tens of thousands of years of your evolution were spent outside. The way your hair grows, the way your ears work, the way you breathe, everything about you is conditioned to keep you alive outdoors. And so off they headed to publish a comprehensive body of work from acoustics to mindfulness to stress reduction to design considerations, making stairs available, giving people the nudge to use stairs versus the elevator, perhaps allocating a certain portion of the cafeteria space so that at least 25% of the staff can eat away from their desk. You don't eat as healthily if you sit at your desk and eat. So all of those components, from psychology to circadian optic nerve science, which has really been rapidly developing, they created this body of work. Of course, in parallel to creating something called the Well Building Standard at the International Well Building Institute, and we'll send links to some of this stuff, they knew that the research had to continue. So Delos set up a joint venture with the Mayo Clinic, and it's one of two joint ventures Mayo has ever made. One is with us, the other is with Apple Computer. And what that space is doing is taking 200 sensors in space, and they built this physical environment that's reconfigurable. Could be a child's classroom, can be a bedroom, can be a hotel setting, can be an office space. and they got subjects to come in and be their test engine. So they can play games with the environment and say, what is the effect of CO2 and cognition? How does heart rate variability adjust when different conditions are related to the light levels? How is rest related to your hormonal balance, serotonin and melatonin? If you think about the night shift on your phone, that's a nice feature, but it's fundamentally based in science. It's saying, your circadian optic nerve tells you when to wake up, when to sleep. And so having the phone beforehand in your face at 10 o'clock at night, it's basically telling you to be awake. So we've got a certification group called the Well Building Standard. We've got a research engine chugging along nicely. And by the way, the certification platform since launch, it's approaching 600 million feet, 62 countries, 12,000 well-accredited professionals, growing rapidly, lots of architects, engineers. So in effect, what's happening is those individuals take a test like a CPA exam, and then they can say, this is how you do it. Yeah, Bob. You can talk about telemedicine, you can get into research. And then the third leg of this stool, Delos, the parent company of the standard, we've been out looking at products to enhance space, commercially available items. So for example, 5 years ago, we launched a hospitality platform. We found after looking at 50 different mattresses, this is the one that sleeps cool. A lot of mattresses, the cheaper ones, actually have volatile organic compounds inside the mattress. So while you're sleeping, you're actually breathing in carcinogens, right? So go cheap and sleep in that way, you may be putting yourself at risk. I think there's going to be at some point class action lawsuits against this kind of aspect, but 8 hours of sleep on something that's not that good can be harmful. So we looked at everything through both the sustainability lens and the health lens, so you can take care of those things. That platform is now in 5,000 hotel rooms and achieving 20% premiums on hotel rooms, from the Four Seasons to the Wyndham to the MGM. Effectively, we said, look, we have a team in China. We have about 50 people there, and there's a huge level of adoption. Remember, they had SARS before COVID-19, and now they got hit with COVID before anyone else. So we took a look at that well building standard, that body of work, and we said, okay, lights, acoustics, design considerations, all that's good for the person in general, and you should do it. And that's why the Morgan Stanley's doing it. That's why the Vatican's doing it. That's why all these different major groups are doing it. But in the very narrow short term, what can we do to convince and entice people back to buildings so that they feel safe, right? I don't know if Hilton's Stay Safe program is effective. I'd have to read an 80-page manual to understand which parts of the CDC they chose to use and so on. So the industry essentially asked us and our task force to come up with what's known as the health safety rating. Now, it's a procedural review of documents and what's happening at Yankee Stadium and how you go into a Foot Locker or a 7-Eleven, and there's a seal on the door. Now, the program launched about 3-4 weeks ago, and there will be a major public awareness campaign in September talking about look for the seal. We have the good fortune of Leo DiCaprio being on our board, for example. So he will be a great spokesperson. A-Rod is a friend of the founders. We have certainly the scientists and so forth. The 17th U.S. Surgeon General, Dr. Richard Carmona, was the co-chair of that 600-person task force that kind of put this together. So in the first week, we had 100 different groups sign up for entire portfolios of buildings globally, and it's been pretty exciting. So it's only one piece of the puzzle. There's 3 parts to COVID. You've got surfaces, they're important, but I will tell you that scientifically they've looked and they've seen that only about 5% of cases are tied to surface transmission. Okay, but it's not zero, so you have to do something. And then you've got air quality issues, right? The micron size of this virus is so small, HEPA filtration doesn't quite get you there, and there's other choices there. And we're doing analysis on all that continually. But the last one is people. We're dirty on a good day, and I don't mean that to be crude in any respect, but your biome has so many different aspects to it that, we can change a space just by physically being there. And so we've got a bit of a program pushing forward with one of the major the big four accounting firms right now to try to help inform people more consistently.
Try to hit where you see opportunities. For example, 98% of the office space in New York is empty right now in Manhattan, and probably in DC, except for around the government. Where do you see tons of opportunity?
You know, I think there's such a tremendous amount of innovation that we're seeing around people's immunohealth. I was on the phone yesterday with a guy who's talking about a sleep score. And what does that mean? Well, if you sleep better, your actual immune system is improved. And now I'd never really thought about a sleep score before, but it kind of makes sense. And so he had a whole innovative approach to researching and continually curating space using IoT devices in the room. So your phone's sitting there, it starts to talk to you about, you know, how you slept last night. I think that's going to be an important component to this. I think there's, for folks that are like you, Bob, who are just such great champions and coaches, and I know Cindy has a deep experience in this with her magic answers. She also, if I remember the bio correctly, there's a lot of ways to touch people and reach them so their mental health can be stabilized. This is so unusual for everybody, and people who've been in the field of coaching and so forth, I think those are some opportunities. But certainly the IoT space is wide open. The exercise space is pretty open.
We got wounded vets that have opened gyms, a lot of them. There's probably 20 of them that have all been on this program. What do they have to do to make their gyms and fitness centers safer? And there's a whole lot of issues out there and not a whole lot of questions, answers.
Yep. It's really complicated. I had a call, an internal call, and by chance, it related to a bunch of folks that had Equinox memberships that they now had to sign up for in advance and so forth. And a couple of them said, even though there was nobody in the space, the exercise space, when they were there, they got a message a couple days later, which is good practice, contact tracing. And they said 3 people in that facility that they'd just been in 2 days earlier had come down with it. So you need to be aware, go get yourself checked and all this stuff. So I think in the end, those environments that are outside the home are going to continually present at least the perception of risk, if not actual risk. So if I was going to innovate here, I would say, what can I do to someone's home office? It used to be a nice to have for maybe a couple hours on a weekend, but now it's a totally different world. Ergonomics, another big space. If you've got an innovative way to lift someone's device up so that they're not, sitting at the wrong position, et cetera, help enable people at home. So, obviously some of the decisions for board members occurred before I came on board to the company, but it's a pretty diverse collection of folks. You have policy people, you got Dick Gephardt on there. We've got thought leaders in design, HOK, because we knew that, those people are thought leaders in the community already, and we want to infuse them with that information. Leo DiCaprio happens to be a friend of the founders, and he's been a sustainability advocate for so long. He's like, hey, can we recreate this island off the coast of Belize? Can you help me rejuvenate it from a health point of view? I've got this vision. Each board member has a story. We've got former chairman of IHG. We've got CBRE on the brokerage side as a participant there. It's been interesting, and I'll tell you, because we have 95 different investors in our company. We're private still. And in there, it's a diverse group, but there's an important group that I really enjoy talking about periodically, and those are doctors. They say, they've been telling us for years, you're doing more for healthcare than we'll ever do in our lifetime. I'm a cardiologist. I can only do surgery on one person at a time. If you keep that person out of my OR for an extra year, extra 6 months, extra never, that's awesome. They literally walk up to you after you present and say, this is amazing. Passive health intervention. That's the way to think of it. Your Fitbit, your blocker, all that stuff, that's great, but you have to change your behavior to make those things work.
Yes.